Hello, everybody. Chawan here. And I totally forgot to do an intro to my interview with Marco Visconti. I actually interviewed him a couple months ago when I was still in Asia. So, yeah, I really enjoyed talking to Marco. He's so knowledgeable, such a scholar gentleman about Aleister Crowley, Thelema, Kabbalah. If you want to learn more about this topic, please keep watching.
It's definitely true that, Thelema due to Crowley, and Crowley being such a difficult person, and especially, somebody who lived over 100 years ago. He died in 47. And, it was like, I always try to describe him to the people that come to my courses at Treadwell's. He was a trust fund kid with an interest in magic. And
he was a hipster, yeah.
So he came from a background of straight up white privilege. We cannot deny that. Everybody wants to try and deny that or reframe Crowley in a different way. I think they're doing disservice to the current, to the tradition, because that is where Thelema comes from, at least intellectually. If maybe spiritually it's different, and we'll discuss it at some point. But intellectually, it comes from this man who was a white kid with around when he inherited his fortune, he had something in the range between 2 and 4 million pounds in today's money. Which, okay, it's not like a billionaire, it's not a Kardashian, but it's a rich guy. I don't have that kind of money. I don't know many people who do.
Yeah.
So, at the same time, I think he always felt this connection to the highest and to the spiritual. He wanted to try and go and figure out for himself what was really there that could enable an evolution of humanity. And of course, he was a bisexual man in a very straight and morally imposed British culture of the time. So he wanted to try and find freedom and liberty for people like him and everybody like him who felt different and didn't really feel at home in that very strict puritanical society of the time.
Around what time period was he alive?
Well, he was born in 1875 and he died in 1947. So, late Victorian period into Georgian period, pretty much. And so he lived the two World Wars. He died at the end of just right after the end of the Second World War, and. It is so that was the time he was living. The times he was living in, and he was born here in the UK in Leamington Spa, and then lived in London most of his life. But then he lived in the US a lot. He lived in Mexico. He lived all over the world. You see this old man Crowley, like addicted to heroin and cocaine, and dying alone with no money in a shabby place. That was absolutely not true. Till the very end, of course, maybe he did end up in several bankruptcies because he did deplete all his inheritance, but that doesn't mean that he ended up in the streets. So that I would always say that that's kind of a narrative that's been put on by people that would want to fight Crowley, to say, the man did a lot of crappy things, and he did. So that's why he ended up like that. But that's not the truth. He had a lot of problems connected to him. At least for me, when I started studying him and I started getting into Thelema, and that was around 25 years ago. That was when I was in my teens, and I discovered Crowley. Of course, at first, the first thing that really resonated with me was this powerful man that was able to command a magic and storm the gates of heaven with a completely different viewpoint on magic and spirituality. But then, at some point I also realized that this man is also deeply flawed because he had a terrible relationship with women. And sadly, this is some of the things that trickled down in Thelema as a culture, and something that I've seen in the groups I've been a member of, and I try to make change about it. And then, in what I'm organizing right now, the group I'm organizing right now, I'm trying to do exactly that. Because,
For those in the audience who are just like, what the fuck is Thelema, or Thelema, or Thelema, or, there's a million ways people pronounce it, and they've probably seen it before, the word, but they're like, what is it? Yeah, what is it?
Let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, Thelema, which I pronounce Thelema, it's a Greek word, and I would say my pronunciation is ancient Greek, Koine Greek, because I studied it as university and in high school. Because in Italy, you can make the horrible choice to study ancient Greek in high school. So that's what I did. And so the pronunciation is Thelema, and it's a Greek word that means will, like the will to do things, the will to establish things, to manifest things. So from the very beginning, one can have the idea that the whole concept of this. First of all, what is this? Is it a religion? It is like a magical system? Is it a philosophy? I would say it's all these things according to what it has to be for you. If you want it to be a religion, it has all the perks of the religion. There's a received text, which is fun, and there's some tenets you can follow. There's rituals you can enact. So yeah, it can be a religion. But if you're not a religious person, Thelema also tells you, well, if that's not your will to see this as a religion, it can be a philosophical school of life. It can really be whatever it needs you to be. And this is important because the concept of will puts the center stage to the person. Christianity, Islam, Hebraism. Usually the center stage is God or God figure, for example. And man, male and female, has to strive towards God. Whereby in Thelema, the center stage is man, humankind, so both male and female. And this is very difficult because probably you always used to use term man to determine male and female. And of course, in today's times, I find it problematic to always call everyone just man. Because then this creates a problem in the culture itself, in the Thelemic culture itself, whereby it's almost implied that then the male is almost the one that actually can be more active, and the women always have to be passive and reactive, which is absolutely not true, and is absolutely not even what is written in the books, whereby some of our goddesses figures like Babylon, they are absolutely strong. More strong than the man, I would say. Like the first goddess you meet in the Book of the Law is Nuit, which is the goddess of the sky and goddess of the cosmos, if you want. And everything else is kind of an accessory, to be fair to Nuit.
Say what I have heard about Crowley and Thelema, and what I think a lot of people think about it. So first of all, there's this prevailing thought that Crowley was a Satanist. And that, that statue of like the horned like god, sort of like what is it? It's another, yeah. That came from Crowley. That's one thing people think. Another thing people think is that Crowley was completely a misogynist and he hated women. And he just used women to do magic, and that he would just have sex with like really strangely, like physically formed women because he thought that it would make him more magically powerful. And a lot of women are just like, oh, weirdo. And another thing that a lot of people, and what I have always thought, was that the people who read Crowley, a lot of them remind me of like people who are really into that sort of like Nietzschean idea of the Übermensch. It's sort of like they read it, and after that they're just like, holy shit, I'm a god. I'm the best. I'm the edgiest of all edgelords, and they've just become complete and utter assholes and douchebags. So I'm just like, I don't want to talk to people who are reading this thing that almost seems like a white supremacist, male, like man's rights advocate. So it's just a lot of really bad stereotypes.
First of all, I don't think they're true. But it's also true that Thelemites as a whole did a very poor job so far to try and contest them, especially the last one, because the first two are very easy to deal with, while the last one is, people should just, act decently, and most people don't, because let's face it, most people are kind of shit, to be fair. So back to the first one. So Crowley was, I would say that Crowley was as much as a Satanist, as much as he was a Christian. I mean, that might sound weird, but what he was really, well, first of all, he was raised by a very strict Christian sect called the Plymouth Brethren, So his parents were super into it, and especially his mother was really, really, really into it. And since Crowley, from a very beginning, from a very early childhood, he always acted a bit weird, and his mother, it was his mother that started to call him like the beast of the apocalypse, because it was like, you're such like a shitty child, you must be the beast of apocalypse. And that thing kind of stick with him, because of course, imagine like you are a little kid in 1875 to 1890, well, 1885, in Leamington Spa, which is a tiny village up north from London. And all you can read is the King James Version of the Bible and nothing else. And then your mother tells you that, well, actually, you are the beast of the apocalypse because you're kind of a naughty boy. And I guess everybody
Mommy
would
issues.
Exactly. Also, that's also what prompted him to look into the end times, the apocalypse, the book of Revelations, and try to find a narrative to make sense of whatever else he wanted to experience on his life. Like the apocalypse of Christianity is the start of Thelema. It's also like, an era stops with the end of whatever, and a new one starts. But that doesn't mean that he was a Satanist. He explored the tropes of Satanism in a way, as much as he explored, Chinese mysticism, the Tao, as much as he explored Sufism in Islam, as much as he explored the more mystical side of esoteric Christianity, Rosicrucianism. He was very much enthused with a book by a German mystic called Karl von Eckert. I cannot never pronounce it. We'll do it right at some point. It was called The Cloud Over the Sanctuary. And
Wait, is it
this
by
book,
Eckhart Meister or something like that?
Yeah, right,
Yes.
exactly. It's good. I mean, me and German names were terrible. Sorry about that. But The Cloud Over the Sanctuary speaks about this mythical group of people that kind of guide humanity to be their best selves in a way. And that's straight up Christian mysticism. That's Rosicrucianism. So he wanted to find that. And in order to do that, he explored everything that could be explored, including Satanism. But he just wanted to play with those tropes, destroying the whatever he came from, like whatever was blocking him down, like a very heavy Christian background, to free himself. So that's like whenever I've done that, I don't have to go there any longer. Also, he did not invent the classic figure of Lucifer, like the Baphomet figure that came from Eliphas Levi, 18th century French mystic, French magician. Crowley thought he was the reincarnation of Levi, so even that figure, the classic Baphomet figure, it's a mixture of different elements that basically underline one of the secrets of magic, Thelemic magic, and that is by mixing together polar opposites. So you have the male and the female, you have the highest and the lowest. So you have the man and the animal. That's why that goat is kind of a man, but it's got the breast, but it's got a penis, and it's a beast, but it's also a man, a human. So by mixing this thing, alchemically mixing this, you can actually transcend the human experience and get closer to God, which goes back to to what you were saying before. Lots of Thelemites. Yeah, they kind of become super edgelord, like the worst kind, because I've done this. Now I'm a god.
Yeah.
It's not that easy at all, And I would argue that as long as you're incarnated as a human, you are a human, and you're experiencing life, and you're experiencing also eventually death as a human. I would argue that is the godlike experience that you can achieve when you realize that maybe there is more to existence than this life. That is more of it's more like a godlike vantage point, because you see that whatever your experience is like, it's a game you decide to play. But from this perspective, to go and say, oh well, I'm a god, I can do what I want because I'm super cool. Yeah, maybe you're still a teenager. You need to grow up a little bit.
I can understand how maybe some of the people who are reading Crowley and who are trying to practice Thelema, they get into it for those sort of ego-driven reasons. So I guess then the next question is, okay, So Crowley was not a Satanist. He wasn't, he's not somebody who was probably inherently, well, maybe he was, but he had mommy issues. And who doesn't, right? And not everybody who's into Thelema is, an asshole. So, so there's that. So then, okay, what is Thelema? Is it what Crowley invented? And you mentioned it's a philosophy, it might be a religion, all these things. So this one guy, he just basically invented this entire system. And what is the system?
Okay. Something that I'm struggling to do in the work I'm doing here is to try and finally divorce Thelema from Crowley. Even Thelema itself, it comes from Crowley, but also comes from Rabelais and one of the books he wrote, which is Gargan for Panteruel, whereby he speaks of this idealistic society of the Abbey of Thelema, where people can do their will. So Crowley was inspired by Rabelais as well. When we say that he started it, it's because in 1904, when he was on honeymoon with his first wife, Rose Kelly, they were like casually honeymooning in Cairo, and he received almost like a call from the above, if you want to say, through his wife, because Rose was like, they were strolling to the Black Museum, and Rose was like, just stop on her tracks and just say, oh, they're calling for you. And since Crowley knew that his wife, up until that moment, he never showed any interest in magic. It almost feels like he married her just to go away from magic, because he had a lot of bad experience already up to that point, because he joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and he was ejected by it, by William Butler Yeats, the famous poet, just remember as well. He became almost like the second-hand man to Mathers, which was his grandmaster, but then they fall apart as well. So he was like, was this younger man, was 27, something like that. That was like, okay, I tried that. I was looking for that. I didn't find anything. Well, what I found wasn't really my thing. So let's get married and let's change perspective. But it didn't work out, because his wife, that up until that moment did not show any interest in magic, told him that they were waiting for him and told him what to do. And that is on 3 successive dates, on 8th, 9th, and 10th April of 1904, he was to prepare a temple space, enter at 12 noon, and wait for the instructions to come, and that he did. And the instruction was Liber Alba Legis, the Book of the Law, which is, again, it's this one in that I have here. And this is Thelema. Everything in Thelema can be found in this book. It's a very complex book to read. I always ask, everybody wants to know about Thelema, read that first, and you won't make anything out of it. I haven't made anything out of it after like 25 odd years. It's very difficult. It's a received text, so there's a lot of allegories. There's a lot of strange things like numbers that on a first glance, I don't know what it is. But I think it's interesting because, again, since also Crowley wrote various comments to it, and in his very last comment, basically say, when everybody who reads this book should burn it and never discuss it again. And that's, so lots of people have done it, maybe missing the point. What he wanted to do, what he wanted to say with that is that to try and avoid another 2,000 years of Christian oppression, well, I would say church oppression, because the Christian message, I don't mind it at all. I would say like Crowley tried to make sure that people would not obsess over explaining to you what the Holy Book is about. Because when you have that kind of authority, and you can say to people, well, this is what the book says, so this is what you should think to be part of this, you miss the point. You miss the point of Thelema. The point of Thelema is that each and everybody should find their own message in it. I would say that there are some points that cannot be discussed. Some points are technical, okay, and you can like intellectually, and I would say almost scientifically, get to those points, because there's various things that you can try, and when you try them, you can get like empirical results, and that should be the same for everyone.
Marco, you actually teach all this stuff, right? You have a course called what is it? No Tears Thelema, or Thelema Without Tears.
It's this course I do at Treadwell's book here in London. It started years ago because when I was manager at Treadwell's, like the owner, Christina Harrington, which has been a very well-known figure in the pagan community worldwide, I would say, but of course here in London. Good friend of mine. I started working for her as a manager, especially on the online shop, and she was like, hey, well, why don't we do some courses on Thelema as well? Because up until that point, so the Treadwells did a lot of things on witchcraft, which is, of course, Christina, that's her background, Wicca, and then alchemy and history of magic and whatnot. I would say like more than 70% of what happens at Treadwells is not so much like selling books, but having events. Like we have events every night of the week, apart from Saturdays and Sundays. But apart from that, there's always something going on. So I started, I welcomed her suggestion, and I started this couple of like one-offs called Meeting Aleister Crowley and His Magic, which is more about this history of the man, and then first steps in Thelema, which was like 2 hours, very concise. This is like the basic rituals. I'll teach you how to do them. And then I started this more like longer course, 6-week course, called Thelema Without Tears, which I always found it funny as a name because Crowley did write a book called Magick Without Tears, which was basically him. Yeah, this is one of the best things he wrote because it's at the very end of his life. It was 46 that came out, 47, maybe at the first time. I don't remember exactly now. And the whole book is he replies to letters that a member of the O.T.O, a sister in the O.T.O, just was sending him like, okay, can you explain me this? Can you explain me that? And we just did like we run it in what's that? Between end of May and end of June, and it's been incredibly successful. There's been like 16 people there, which was like full. Because I was like, I cannot really do more than 16 people because you want to allow each person to be able to ask questions and whatnot. And even if the session is like 2 hours per night, it goes away in a second. And I was incredibly surprised to see how many people came to it with a very open mind, and how many people like stick to it. Like I would say that of the 16 people that came to the first course, I'm still in contact with at least 12 of them, and of them, all of them, they're now part of this group that I started after leaving the Ordo Templi Orientis. So you can see that you can definitely find a way to teach this very complex and very spread out system of magic and spirituality.
What's the basic syllabus for the 6 weeks? Like, let's say somebody goes there, knows absolutely, like they're coming in from the street. So over the 6 weeks, what are some basic things they're going to learn about Thelema?
Something that the way I structured it is like the first 9. The first time is always like an overview. In a way, it's kind of something like what we're doing right now, and then like some very basic exercises, because I also believe that Thelema, in the Book of the Law, there's like 2 aphorisms that really condense Thelema. The first you might have heard is "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," and the second is "Love is the law, love and the will." And "Do what thou wilt" starts with doing. So if like Thelema is all about doing things. You can read as much as you want. You can obsess about like a little minutia of what Crowley wrote or not didn't write. But if you then don't do it, you put yourself, in a circle and try to do something, then you will not really get it. So what I try to do, especially even on the first night, is like at the end of the day, after having spoke like half an hour, about 1 hour, I say, okay, now we'll go in a circle and we'll do a middle pillar exercise, which is it's a Kabbalistic working to like kind of center yourself, and usually being a Kabbalist, like you always try to pull the lights from Keter. I don't know if you're familiar with
Kabbalist.
Okay. Kabbalah is basically Jewish mysticism, and it can be understood in many ways. Let's say it's a way for humanity to try and reconnect with God, and by retracing over a cliff called the Tree of Life, the steps of creation. So imagine that in Jewish mysticism, which informed a lot of the magic we do in Western ceremonial tradition, the idea is that, from God, whatever it is, we cannot know, it's called Ein Sof Hour, a limitless light, because we cannot really understand God, because beyond us. At some point, this light pours down into the universe and create 10 different stations. 10 different stations, which are called the Sephirot. Sephirot in Hebrew means emanation, yeah, exactly, something like that. Means emanation number, can be mean, Hebrew words can mean many things at once. So let's go with emanation. So you have these 10 Sephirot that go from Kether, the crown, to Malkut, kingdom. So exactly, so you can then trace it on your body, and you can almost say your body is a mirror of the cosmos. So if the cosmos is organized by this tree of light, you can then call down this tree of light onto your body, and you can try and feel that experience of light coming from God and feeling it, feeling your entirety of body. And that's a very strong exercise.
What happens when you do the middle pillar exercise? What's that supposed to do for you?
It's kind of started as a light meditation, so regulation of breathing, try to sit with your back straight and being very in the moment, and then through guided visualization, because of course eventually people are doing that, but I read them, something to them, and through guided visualization and through changing of the breathing pattern, and then chanting names, because, for instance, one way is you start chant the name of Nuit, Hadith, Haivas, which are that's called gods in the Thelemic system. By doing that, once you've done it, and all the ritual lasts I would say between 20 minutes tops. And it's funny because at the end of the day, I always ask people so how much time do you think we've done this? Everybody says, it's been 5 minutes. That was so fast. And then they look at the clock and they realize they've been there for 20 minutes. So it's yeah, that's, having this kind of distortion of perception, being very focused, and us to lose the concept of time, even for short period of time. That's also what I would say magic is about. It's kind of incredibly focused perspective on what you're doing, and that's a great way for people to just get into magic and say, okay, well, this is definitely different. This is something. So what else is there? And from that point on, the rest of the course, the rest of the weeks, there are 5 weeks, are all about trying to concentrate on specific elements. One is the elements, and that is the 5 classic elements with air, water, fire, and then spirit. Because again, that's another way of finding your center and creating what is called your pentagram, in order to then aspire the hexagram. Because pentagram is the perfected man that has balanced the 4 elements to under the aegis of the spirit. And by doing that, it's almost you can then create, data, a telescopic dish to go and see what's up there, God, or gods, or whatever you want to call it. And that's called the hexagram. In Thelema, then you also have the heptagram, the 7th point that starts, which lies beyond God. And I would say this is one of the new elements of Thelema, that moving from the old Aeon and the old magic of the old Aeon to what we do now. From that, then we start working on teaching about pentagram rituals, hexagram rituals, and then working on the tarot. Completely can be traced completely on the tree of life. So you can put the Kabbalah and tarot together, because by doing that, and this is what Crowley did in a book called 777, by doing that you can create a very detailed set of correspondences that then can be useful to you when you create your own rituals. It's going to be very, very brainy, I would say.
Wait, so is it the Thoth Tarot, the Thoth or Thoth Tarot?
Yeah.
That's what Crowley's system, the Thelema or Thelema,
Yes.
Is that what it's all based on?
Yes. What the Thoth deck was a joint effort by Frida Ledieris, which, by the way, is the one that did those pictures behind me, and Crowley. It's funny because at first they thought they would work on it a couple of months. They worked on it 5 years, during the Blitz. So basically, like while London was bombed by Nazi Germany, they were still working on it. And it's like when you read the diaries, it's such a commitment because they really wanted to do it. They had a very weird relationship. They were not lovers. I think Fridaris was one of the few women that Crowley did not live with, I suppose. And what they did. Not only Lady Aries completely like redrawn all the 78 cards, and I personally I love the style. She was unique in what it was like, very like geometric shapes that change into each other, and there's a lot of use of color. But also she followed Crowley's ideas what the new cards should look like. You know, moving from the classic Rider-Waite deck into this new Thelemic deck, which also has some changes because, for instance, some cards are changing in position, and some iconography is very different because again, it's to showcase the new laws of Thelema. How has the magical laws changed from the previous Aeon to this new Aeon? And when I speak about Aeons, we haven't really touched that. Basically, in 1904, when he received the Book of the Law, he stated that was the start of a new era. That's what an Aeon means. Aeon can be it's mostly used in Gnosticism, and which is another tradition that Crowley worked with. And Aeons are both periods of time, and also I would say magical laws, and I would say also gods. So each time an Aeon change is because the previous god almost goes into retirement, if you wish, and a new management comes in, and I guess that's what it is.
Uh-huh.
So, in Thelema was like ushering in the Aeon of the child of Horus, while the Aeon of the father, Osiris, was going into retirement.
Why are these Aeons Egyptian gods?
Well, that's a very good question, in fact. They took the form of Egyptian gods because Liber Alba Legis was received in Cairo. Crowley never really wrote extensively about it, but other people did, and from my perspective, having worked with these entities, energies, gods, for 20 odd years, I would say that those Egyptian names are masks. In fact, in the Book of the Law, you hear of Nuit, which is the goddess Nuit. I mean, it goes back to the goddess of the sky. But it's a very different Nuit, because the Nuit of the O.T.O, of the original Egyptian mythology, it's not such a prominent deity. I mean, it's one of the original 9, but it's not such a prominent deity as Isis, for instance, later. In the Book of the Law, she's the no more. There's nothing more than her because she's everywhere, and she is like the cosmos, the infinite expansion. Then you have Hadith. Hadith doesn't really exist in Egyptian lore because Bejuti is the actual name of that wind globe deity. But of course, Crowley didn't know much of Egyptian. I mean, it wasn't much of an Egyptian scholar at the time. And also there were like very poor translations of the hieroglyphs at the time. I mean, Egyptian law was just being discovered with the discovering of the Rosetta Stones a couple 20 years before. So, it was much more of a new thing. Gods came into Thelema as Egyptian deities. I would say they're Thelemic energies of the New Year that took the guise and mask of Egyptian gods because they were received they came into this world in that point in Cairo. When you go into when you study Thelema, when maybe you join groups, like if you join the Ordo Templi Orientis, without saying anything that I'm still bound by oath, you see other things as well. You see other names and you see other gods, and that is because at the end of the day, Thelema tells you that you are your own god. That is the concept in the Book of the Law. There is no god but man. Which most people read that and think, oh, it's an atheist, they're all atheists, like they don't believe in God. I would argue that there is no God but man can be also seen as there is no man but God. So by inverting that, the concept is that each of us carry the spark of God. So each of us eventually will find our own hidden God, and we will call him or her or it, whatever it is, sorry, the way we decide to call it. For Crowley, it was the Egyptian deities because he had that experience there.
The thing that you're describing about Crowley, he reminds me of like a DJ, right? He's like mixing and remixing like beats from different sorts of genres to make like a cohesive piece, but he's not just sticking to one dogma, one order. And I'm starting to think like maybe that's his main contribution.
It can be seen like lots of this things can be seen onto this day's discourse as cultural appropriation, if you wish. But Crowley did it being very, very honest about it because he loved all of this. He wanted to create something new. I guess maybe it is a very white. I wouldn't say white supremacy because it's got a bad connotation. But when you're a member of the British Empire and you think everything belongs to you in a way. But he approached it in an honest way. Like he wanted to get whatever he really loved and make it something new and be almost paying homage to all of it. So yeah, you can definitely see it was like a spiritual.
I just spoke to somebody. So Swamiji Nisarg, and he was talking about the I Ching and how Crowley loved the I Ching. Like, he was a devout student of it. I mean, it wasn't just like how most people, they read a couple books and it's like, oh, I know I Ching. No, like, Crowley really studied it, and he was trying to find, towards the end of his life, a cohesive system to kind of put with the I Ching. So in that respect, I often tell people, you can tell who's culturally appropriating and who's culturally appreciating. It's kind of like pornography. You just know. You don't know on paper, but when you see what they do and how they express things, you know who's appropriating. But in this respect, it seems as though Crowley was definitely more of an appreciator. I mean,
you're right. He was really appreciated the word and the multicolors of the word. He wanted to be part of it. I mean, I also remember he was straight up bisexual. So I mean, he loved men and women alike, and he loved the human experience, all of it. Something that I didn't answer before when you had one of your questions you asked me, it is also true that he had this weird concept about sex with, he put a famous thing in the paper, looking for dwarves and Harrison Pack's women and whatever. It was, he was doing that because he knew that sex is one of the most powerful experience of humanity that we have. But also to try and marry something that is inherently connected with the idea of beauty. We feel attracted to those we like, right? And we want to have sex with people we like. Most of the times, especially the first thing is physical attraction, right? So he was thinking, what if I marry that feeling with something that usually involves use the energy of created, physical energy created through the sexual union in almost in a detached way. So that was the idea behind it. I think he botched it many times, to be fair, because he was also a very self-centered man, and that's no denying that. And most of the times he left people behind, and they did become emotionally attached to him, and he did not. Because for him it was almost like, hey, I told you before, this was on an experiment, right? And then they're oh yeah, but I'm in love with you.
Oh my God, he was a fuckboy. Okay.
You know what? Honestly, that's a problem per se, and unfortunately, I can testify that in the Thelemic community, you find a lot of people like that, men and women. Right? You see, and I think that's missing the point, and completely, because whereby yes, you can decide to engage in a relationship on whatever terms that work for both parties, but it must be clearly stated at the beginning. And if you don't, then that is a problem right there. And I would argue even the magic doesn't work as well, because also if you read Crowley's diaries, a lot of his sex magical attempts were completely failures.
Well, you've mentioned O.T.O, and I'm guessing that O.T.O is connected to Thelema.
I'm not a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis anymore, so I'm not speaking on behalf of them.
Okay.
The word stands for Ordo Templi Orientis, or Order of the Templars of the East, or Order of the
Who created O.T.O? Crowley?
Yeah. Crowley came to a year later. The O.T.O was created by Karl Kellner, which was industrialist and also a Freemason. And he...
Wait, Freemason? I think when most people think of Freemason, they think about, like, secret societies and, like, you look on the back of the dollar bill and there's that pyramid with the all-seeing eye and they're like, ooh, Illuminati.
Trust me, I mean, I'm a Freemason as well, and trust me, that's nothing like that. That's nothing like that at all. It's... Freemasonry it is really, in this day and age, it really is a big charitable foundation where, yeah, there's an element of ritual done, but it's mostly like men getting together, or women, because there's also co-masonry. It exists, and I wouldn't say it exists much in the US, but in the UK it exists. It's thriving. You also have female-only Freemasonry, so yeah, there's all over the spectrum if you want.
Wait, is this a social group then, or it's a magical order that happens to also be social?
It started as a magical mystical order. I would say it's a mystical order more than a magical order, and the difference is subtle, but it's there. And over the years, it just changed because it became more of a. Have you ever heard of something like the Lions Club or a Rotary Club? Those are the same things. They come from Freemasonry. But they got rid of all the meeting in lodges and opening the lodge and closing the lodge. While Freemasonry, we still do that. But at the end of the day, it's a group, it's a brotherhood of people that want to try and do good for the world. And the way it's done, it's mostly by charity drives and try to help the community. Just to give you an example, here in the UK, United Grand Lodge of England, which is the first and main Masonic body in the world, it's the second biggest contributor to charities in the country. Back when Karl Kellner in 1902, let's say early 1900s, created the Ordo Templi Orientis, he wanted to get the idea of Freemasonry, and we don't know much about those people that started the O.T.O. There's a beautiful book called Forgotten Templars by Richard Kaczynski, which I suggest to everybody who wants to go deeper. So they basically, Karl Kellner, just like the story goes, that he discovered Tantra, and so basically sex magic, and he wanted to bring it into a Masonic environment. So
he wanted to have orgies, basically.
Sorry?
He wanted to have orgies at his social gatherings.
Well, not really, because sex magic is not about orgies, really. But let's say he wanted to use the power of sex to make his Masonic work even better. I'm just trying to make it simple, okay? And he created Ordo Templi Orientis by giving a Templar spin to the usual Masonic framework. The Masonic framework is basically all based on the Old Testament, and then certain later orders of Freemasonry, like the Ancient and Accepted Rite, for instance, then extend the Old Testament narrative into the New Testament. Okay, so Karl Kellner say, hey, this is cool, but let's put Templars into the mix as well, because everybody loves Templars, especially in that time. And the idea, that this highly mystical and highly militaristic group of Christian fighter monks went to the Promised Land and recaptured the Promised Land and discovered something there. We never like this. That's what the Templars like. They discovered something. And people have inferred many things. What is that they discovered? We don't really know. So,
remember that Indiana Jones movie? Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail?
In 1907, he has all these Masonic degrees. Crowley was part of this more clandestine side of Masonry, and then he found the O.T.O. because, by virtue of his high degrees in Masonry, he was invited in the O.T.O. as well. And then the turning point that made him think this could be something I can use for Thelema is in 1912 when Theodore Royce, which was the Grand Master for the world at the time, came and visited him almost like the story goes, almost like, what the hell have you done? Because you published the secrets of O.T.O. And he was like, what? What are you talking about? And apparently, in one of the books he published called the Book of Lies, apparently without knowing, Crowley, in fact, wrote down in poetry form some of the highest of the secrets of the O.T.O, the things that Royce at the time thought nobody else should know these things, which is sexual magical acts, sexual magical rituals. And Crowley was like, well, I didn't know that. So Royce, the story goes, that Royce told him, now that you know that you publish this, I need to make sure you sign an oath of secret because you cannot publish more. And so from that point up until the early 1920s, then he became the grandmaster of O.T.O. And then he started to use the O.T.O as a vehicle of promulgating the Law of Thelema. Or at least that's what he wanted to do. He changed the narrative of a lot of the degrees from strictly Masonic to being strictly Thelemic. And of course, I cannot speak plainly about what happens in the degrees.
So can we just clear this up? Okay. So Thelema is the frame. It's a thought framework, but the O.T.O is kind of the place that kind of takes Thelema and says, "This is how we're going to do it and teach it." So is it kind of like a church?
No, it's more like it's more like a gym.
A gym?
Yes, because by being a member of Ordo Templi Orientis, in theory, you can learn how to live your life in a more Thelemic way, which is similar to the message of Freemasonry. Because by being a Freemason, in theory, you can learn how to live your life the best you can, like to be a good citizen, to be a good person. Okay, I would say that the aim of the O.T.O was supposed to be to teach you that. Not so much the magical system, because that's more the AA that teaches like the magical mystical system of Thelema. What we were discussing before, the Thelemic middle pillar, that's something that, for instance, you will learn in the AA. I hear these things, how do I do them? I do it in my life to live my life Thelemically. The problem there is that over the years, the O.T.O has gone through many incarnations, if you wish. When Crowley died in 1947, he left it to a man called Karl Germer, Frater Saturnus, and he didn't do a very good job, I would argue, because he basically let it die. There were, the worst. By the end of the 40s, only one lodge was really active, and that was the Kabbalah lodge in Pasadena, in Los Angeles. If you heard about Jack Parsons, or you've seen Strange Angel, that's him, that's them. Basically, Jack Parsons was the master of the lodge at the time, and he was the only one really working the O.T.O at the time, because over the years, probably before and then Germer, they just didn't do a good job at finding the right people to run the various lodges, and he just died down. Then what happened there is that there's been a period between the 60s and the late 70s where the O.T.O wasn't really there, and then another American called Grady McMurtry, reactivated it, and then there's been the 80s where while this man was trying to restart the O.T.O, there were claimants from a man called Marcelo Motta in Brazil that say, well, no, I am the actual O.T.O, so they went to the court, and Brady won. And then a man here in the UK called Kenneth Grant saying, no, I am the O.T.O. I would argue that in the end, the Americans won the right to call themselves O.T.O through court cases, and just because basically they purchased the copyright to the term.
Wait, how long were you in the O.T.O, and what was your role in the O.T.O?
I was just over 5 years. People that are the Grand Secretary General is a great man. There's people in what's called the chapter. They're great people, but most of them, again, you have these old people, and when I say old, 65 and up, that are completely divorced to the reality of this world, and they're clinging onto their power without wanting to ever relinquish anything, and without ever wanting to make change in the world, which is what the O.T.O should do. I mean, if you read like the founding papers, the O.T.O really, the founding papers not by Calvin, the original Masonic ones, but I mean like the O.T.O ones done by Crowley. The O.T.O should be like an engine of change to promulgate liberty and freedom, and then that's really not happening, because my experience tells me that all happens is that you get these little cliques of people that want to belong together, that they really don't want to engage with the outside world, so it becomes kind of a cultish behavior. It's like people in certain places, not here in the UK, but definitely in Florida, like leaders like encourage people to just marry to each other. It's kind of cultish, like sectarian behavior to it all. But this wasn't really the problem. The problem, what happened for me, like I say, well, this is not good anymore. When in the summer of 17, August 17, the Charlottesville rallies that happened in America, like the fucking Nazis. I'm really anti-Nazis. So, that happened, and one member of the O.T.O, a very young member, ended up being in the pictures. I mean, that picture is still shared. And so lots of people like me and others were like, this is bad publicity, we should do something about it. And some of these key older leaders were like, well, I don't know about that, because at the end of the day, Trump is good. So that is the problem that has been tearing the O.T.O apart for the last 2 years, and one of the two reasons I left, because I have to face reality that not all, those people at the top are old and treated, but also because they're fucking fascists. That's the reality of that, and that's a problem, because again, Thelema, Crowley says very specifically that Thelema should fight fascism as much as it should fight communism, should fight all sorts of totalitarianisms and anything that destroyed the freedom of the individual. So that was me. I was like, what the fuck? What am I? Am I like a public figure for? I don't want to be that, And then what happens next is I uncovered a series of sexual scandals here in the UK, whereby a member literally went on to rape a couple of sisters. And let's say due process insider due process was done, but I think it was done very poorly. This person was allowed to resign before being expelled, and basically, in a way, for me, was a way of the leadership of this country to just wash their hands with it, because we cannot do anything. The guy resigned, we cannot expel him anymore, and that was like it just proved that the people at the top are not in for the right reasons anymore, at least for me, especially when they let, let's say, a middle manager person to just then go online and victim shame and slut shame one of these two sisters that were raped, which is a horrible thing. And she's a woman, so she's like, well, I'm a woman, I can say these things. And I was like, no, bullshit, you don't say this thing. So that was me, was the end of the story. I'm leaving because I don't believe in the O.T.O. That said, there's plenty of good people in it. There's people I know in Italy, they're fantastic. There's people in America, including like Grandmaster Sabasius. They're great men. They're trying all they can to kind of steer the order back on track. But I don't know if it's possible, because
if somebody, okay, let's say after hearing this, people are just like, oh, O.T.O sounded really like cool and far out, but I'm not going there anymore. Then where can they go to learn about Thelema?
That is a very good question, because there's nothing else that really can contend the O.T.O's position, because it's a very established brand, right? Like you think Harvard, you think Oxford, like a huge university. I would say that is the same for the O.T.O and Thelema. The brand is there, and again, the teachings are good. If you're interested in Thelema, if you're interested in going deeper into Thelema, the O.T.O does teach you the right way. The problem is that the people teaching it right now are a piece of shit for the most. Sorry for my French, but So what can they do? I don't know. I've been trying to set up something alternative here in London, but it will never be like the O.T.O. Also because I decided to not teach the same things that the O.T.O. teaches, because I have all the rituals, right? So I could say, okay, I'm going to do O.T.O. 2.0, but I also have swore oaths of keeping those things secret, or only speak with other initiates. So I would never do that. I set up something called Ecclesia Gnostica Universalis, which is an agnostic church, which was first established in the 1990s, when by a group of people like Tao Erigena and a couple of others, that decided not to do a split from the O.T.O, but they decided to create a little like an alternative. Okay, and then another person called Alan Greenfield kind of revitalized again in the year 2000, and then now I'm doing it again. Pretty much, it's more like an open source kind of group, like but again, it will never be like the O.T.O. So it's not like people that are watching this video that can say, okay, I want to join, because in reality, I can only work with people that are here in London, and so while the O.T.O. it's all over the world, and you can find ways to go to O.T.O. gatherings. It's just that I cannot in good conscience suggest anybody to join the O.T.O, because in good conscience, I don't know if somebody joins now, they won't get raped 3 years down the line, because at some level, the common it's just fractured. So I cannot see that something bad will happen to them, because there's a lot of shitty people in here.
Well, for people who are just like wanting to know more just about Thelema, maybe not the O.T.O and how they do it, but just about, because as you mentioned, like that book, reading it and stuff, it's not the easiest read, right? What are some things that you can tell them ahead of time that will help them as they're reading that book?
Well, I would say that there are other books that can prepare to read the law, and there's one book called Fresh Fever from the Skies by this guy called E.O. 131. That's a good intro. That's a good primer. I've got this one. There's this huge document called The Law of Thelema by Antibach, and it's interesting because this author here is one of those neo-Nazi Thelemites that I would usually not suggest, but honestly, he did an amazing job, because what he did here is that he put all quotes from Crowley from his entire corpus, and he structures, okay, when Crowley speaks about mysticism, this is what Crowley says. When Crowley speaks about politics, this is what he speaks. And despite him being definitely on the far right spectrum of things, he did a very good job at keeping it neutral. So I would say that book, The Law of Thelema by Antibal, and then you can go into Liber Albilegis and have a better understanding of what Liber Albilegis is. There is, if you're more interested in something more practical, there's what's called the Magick of Aleister Crowley, or what's the Magick? Magick of Aleister Crowley by Jean-Marie Duquette, which is a fantastic primer. It's Jean-Marie Duquette is one of the oldest members of living members of the Thelemic system, because member of the AA, member of the O.T.O, one of the good members.
One of the reasons why I'm getting more interested in Crowley, when before I was just sort of is my friend Barrow was telling me this, and I was like, this makes sense, how a lot of chaos magicians, they, especially the ones who have written a lot of books and are well known in the circle, they had a very strong foundation of Crowley. And from that, they were able to get great results from chaos magic, whereas a lot of people, they jumped into chaos magic without having that foundation, and they found their results to be a little bit lackluster. So this makes me almost think there must have been something about what Crowley was writing about Thelema, that gave these chaos magicians the ability to be free. So maybe, just like Picasso said, he had to first study for years and years at art school so that he could be the cubist artist that he became.
Like you said before, he was out of this law for religion and spirituality, and he went in a mix and match from many different cultures, and that's what Thelema is. So I would argue that he was definitely maybe the first chaos magician. I'm a very good friend with Phil Hine, that he was one of the original chaos magicians. He came to one of my classes because it's like, I was never a Thelemite. I was like, what are you talking about? You kind of wrote like one of the many books on that. But he doesn't feel himself as a Thelemite at all. He is, his background is more in witchcraft of all things, actually, and then in Tantra and, Eastern traditions. But it's definitely true that people like Ray Sherwin and Pete Carroll, they had this huge Thelemic background because at the times, like 70s, 80s in the UK, there was no O.T.O, so there was no way you can easily go and say, okay, I'm a Thelema. But at the same time, there were a lot of people like printing Crowley because the O.T.O not being reactivated yet, nobody was actually claiming copyright, so everybody was right. So of course people come into this text and was like, oh, this is interesting, it's very liberating, and that's how Chaos Magic came together. It is definitely true that they had as you said before, the discipline to do it very strictly. Whereby Chaos Magic, the way I then discovered Chaos Magic in the 90s, it just became something like, well, you don't have to do much work, just do a sigil, and it's going to be fine. I would argue, yeah, that's a good way to start. But if in order to have like actual success and repeated success, you must give yourself a strict discipline, because if not, it's just like going to the gym once and say, oh yes, I feel less bloated, but if you want to have a six-pack, you have to go to the gym every time.